Hello, everybody. Welcome to MHTV. It's lovely to have you with us tonight. We've got a great subject and a great guest. But before I go into that, let me hand over to Dave so he can tell you how you can join in with us tonight, because I'd really like to hear what you think. Dave?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. It's Dave here. And to just say again, if it's your first MHTV tonight, thank you for joining in. Really easy to get involved. You've got a couple of options. The first is on Twitter. All you need to do is include the hashtag MHTV. I'll be looking for any tweets that mentions that this evening, and we'll bring in any of those that are appropriate into the conversation. The other option that you've got is on Facebook Live. All you need to do is, while you're watching the video, head to the right. There's a little place there where you can type in any questions, any comments, join in a conversation. And again, anything that's appropriate, we'll bring you into the conversation. Back over to you, Nicky.
Okay, hello everybody. We're going to be talking about perinatal mental health. But before we get stuck into that topic, let's go to our guest so that she can introduce herself and let you know. Hello, this is Jane.
Hello, thanks for having me. Thanks for asking me to come and speak to you about perinatal mental health. So my name's Jane Fisher. I'm a mental health nurse. I've been a nurse for around 17 or 18 years now. And for the last 18 months, I've worked at the University of Central Lancashire in Preston as a mental health nurse lecturer. I'm incredibly passionate about perinatal mental health. So it's a real privilege to be coming here and talking about it tonight.
Fantastic. So can you tell us a little bit about how you came to do this type of work? Why you're so passionate about it?
So I've got 3 children, and when my youngest daughter Bella, she was born in 2015. At that time, I was a community mental health nurse. Absolutely loved my job as a CPN, and I went on maternity leave to have my daughter Bella. And then not long after she was born, I quite traumatically and also quite dramatically went from a community mental health nurse on maternity leave to a mental health patient virtually overnight. I quite unexpectedly experienced my own perinatal mental health challenges and required care and services under my local mental health teams. So I was on maternity leave, but also accessing services that were local to me at the same time. It was. Yeah, it was quite a surprise to me. I didn't expect that was what was gonna happen, and I was really quite significantly, quite acutely unwell until Bella was about 10 to 11, 12 months old. So it was a year of quite acute mental illness. A lot of women do go on to make a complete recovery from perinatal mental health challenges, which is great. And unfortunately, some women, like myself, go on to develop more longer-term mental health challenges. So for the last 7 years, I've been navigating what at times is quite a difficult journey to navigate, being both a mental health service user, which I still am now, a mental health nurse, and also now a mental health lecturer as well. So it is challenging to navigate those different identities. But since then, I've pretty much not stopped talking about perinatal mental health since then. I think it's such an important area to talk about, and it's so important in terms of child development and mum's long-term mental well-being. So yeah, I've kind of been passionate about perinatal mental health since then, really.
It's a hell of a journey, isn't it? Because you said you had 2 children before that. Was there any sign that this was going to be a different experience?
I think looking back now with hindsight, there probably were signs that things weren't quite right. But it was after I had Bella, where I'd never needed the care of mental health services before then. So it was quite a shock, really. It was quite a difficult, well, you can imagine, quite a difficult season to navigate, especially with having 3 small children as well. I had a variety of symptoms. I couldn't sleep even when Bella was fast asleep. I was still lying there awake. Making decisions was incredibly difficult. I remember going to the supermarket, and my son has a milk allergy, and I was in Tesco, and I was just looking at the whole variety of milk alternatives that there were, and it just felt so overwhelming. And I just could not decide which milk to buy. So I left with no milk. So apologies to my son Joshua for that. But yeah, making decisions was incredibly difficult. Leaving the house was incredibly difficult as well. I was really anxious. I was really worried. But anyone who's had small children will know that staying inside the house with toddlers all day is in fact more challenging than taking the toddlers out. So I had to go out, but it was incredibly difficult, incredibly stressful. And things just escalated, things got worse. Then I began to be quite paranoid as well. I used to think that people were watching us, people were plotting against us, that I was in danger, that the kids were in danger. So it was really quite a traumatic journey, whilst navigating, trying to be a mum to 3 small children. My husband was self-employed, working from home. He was trying to keep things as ticking over as possible, as much for our eldest too. But yeah, it was really an incredibly challenging time, and made me kind of reflect on my own practice as a nurse. Kind of brought it home to me that, the actual kind of pure terror and suffering that occurs when people are acutely unwell. It was also a real challenge navigating how to explain to my oldest daughter at the time, how to explain to her what was going on, and why mummy was crying a lot of the time, and why mummy couldn't go out and do this and that. And it was actually my husband that brought it up for the first time. And he was driving me to a mental health appointment. We had the kids in the car, and my oldest said, "Where's mummy going?" And my husband said, "Mummy's got to go and see a doctor because mummy's mind is poorly and mummy's feeling sad." And that was the first time we kind of spoke about it, with the kids. And I suppose from that moment up until now, because I still live with ongoing mental health challenges, it's navigating being a mum and being a parent, but also being someone who lives with a mental health condition, and how do we explain that to the kids, and what's age appropriate for them to know. So that was a real challenge for me.
How did you figure out what was happening to you? Because obviously if you're seeing this from the outside, you'd be like, "Oh, I'm looking at," but when it's happening to you, sometimes that can be quite confusing. So how did you twig what was going on?
I'd say probably for around 6 months, I really didn't have any insight into what was happening. I didn't realise that I was unwell. I didn't realise that I was suffering from perinatal mental health problems. I simply thought that I was a rubbish mum, that I was failing my kids, and that I was just doing a terrible job, or wasn't cut out for motherhood. That was kind of what I put it down to for a very long time. So it probably took, at least 6 months, if not longer, for me to actually kind of consider the fact that actually, you know, this may be a mental health problem, or how I'm feeling might actually be a symptom of a perinatal mental health problem. But yeah, that took a long time. And my 10-12 years as a mental health professional prior to this gave me no further insight into the fact that I was really unwell at the time.
And so you sort of get to the stage now where you realize what's happening. What kind of support did you get around you?
I had an incredibly supportive health visitor who had a background in mental health, which we were incredibly lucky to have that, and we feel incredibly blessed that that support was there from our health visitor. Unfortunately, it took a while to get support from mental health services. And my health visitor was a real advocate for us during that time, and making sure that those referrals did go through and I did get, you know, the help and the support. Unfortunately, it was 7 years ago. In my area, there wasn't any specialist perinatal mental health teams at that time, which I do feel sad about when I look back. I think if I would have had access to more specialised support sooner, I do think that my longer term outcomes might have been slightly better. So I think it's really great now that there are so many specialist community perinatal mental health teams for mums that are struggling. So unfortunately, I did have to wait quite a while to access mental health care, and then that's a journey that I'm kind of still on today, just navigating mental illness, motherhood, being a nurse, being a lecturer, general life. I think it was a difficult time when I came out of the perinatal period. So that year, or that 2 years now, that's referred to as the perinatal period. You know, there was no dramatic. I didn't wake up when Bella turned 1 or when Bella turned 2, and you know, mental illness is gone now. The perinatal period is ended, so I'm all good now. That's, you know, we can park that. I'm all good. That didn't happen, and that was quite difficult. And I kind of describe that as that's when I almost graduated from perinatal mental health problems to kind of generic mentally ill. Which was quite difficult to navigate that journey as well.
No, you're putting so much in my head when you're talking about these things, because I completely understand what you're saying when you're talking about, you know, having these different roles and how they inform each other, how they help each other, and how sometimes you would think they would help, and they absolutely don't. I guess once you'd realised it was a perinatal mental health issue, you were thinking when the perinatal period stops, it's going to all stop. And then when it didn't, how did you, because you say you kind of graduated, what was that like?
It was really quite difficult, to be honest. And I think other people's perceptions, I think in the perinatal period, there's kind of a clear cause of illness. You've just had a baby, you know, your body's falling apart, your hormones are all over the place, you know, you're breastfeeding a baby every 2 hours. You know, from kind of, you know, there was a lot more kind of understanding for that. But I think when that period ends and, you know, oh, okay, you're still not better now. I think that was difficult, and that's still difficult now. You know, I do go through times where it's very difficult to live with mental illness, and there are, you know, daily, weekly challenges that I navigate. I guess the way I think about it now is I think about kind of recovery for me is not coming off meds, it's not being discharged from services, it's not the removal of a diagnosis. For me, recovery is living as well as I can do with ongoing mental health challenges and navigating, you know, being a lecturer and being a mum with those struggles, because I think I would be waiting perhaps a very long time if I put my life on hold until I didn't have a mental illness anymore. So it's definitely changed my view of recovery as well.
Yeah, I can see that. I guess one of the things that always strikes me about the kind of identity that people have when they have mental health issues is it's one of those things that almost erases all the others. And that's a real problem. Like, you know, this idea that, you know, you being a mum is the second role you have, and that's not true. It's your first role. So have you any thoughts on that, or maybe some of the sort of stigma you've encountered? Or
yeah, I think there's definitely less stigma than perhaps there used to be, but I think we're naive if we think that there isn't still stigma attached to mental health conditions and perinatal mental health conditions. When people have a baby, it's supposed to be this magical, wondrous time, you know, where you've got a brand new baby, and everything's idyllic, and you know, you're in this kind of breastfeeding, you know, bubble, and people are bringing you food. You know, and the reality is, you know, your body's falling to pieces, you're knackered, you don't know whether, you know, even without perinatal mental health challenges, it's an incredibly challenging time to be a new mum. There's society pressures to get back to work, to get back in the skinny jeans again, get back to the gym. There's a lot of pressure, and it's a major life event. It's a major change. And when you kind of throw perinatal mental illness into the mix, it becomes, you know, just incredibly even more challenging than it is without. So I think there is still stigma attached. Stigma is definitely less, but like I said, we're naive to think that there's still no stigma. I experience stigma still to this day. I also think there can be an extra layer of stigma attached to being a mental health professional with a severe and enduring mental illness as well. Again, I think that is less than it was perhaps 7 years ago. But again, I think we're naive to believe that there's still not some stigma attached to that, which for me is just ridiculous, and it doesn't make sense, and it shouldn't be that way. And that's one of the reasons why I do talk about some of my own experiences. Being a mental health professional does not make you immune to experiencing a mental health condition.
I think there's a kind of false comfort for some people, isn't there? And imagine like they kind of the glass window. There's those people that have this happen to them, and there's us who don't have that. But like that's it's never been true, has it? I mean, in the past, I think there was some really kind of brutal treatment of nurses who got sick one way or another. You know, people being asked to sort of shuffled off onto nights and out, or being asked if they're already cut out for this anymore, or, you know, just being given, experiencing anger, I think, from colleagues for somehow kind of breaking this promise of never getting sick, which is so strange because, you know, you wouldn't be a physical health nurse and have people be mean to you if you've got a cold or it's such a weird thing, isn't it? But I wonder if it comes from a place of fear, maybe.
Possibly, yeah. And I suppose a little bit of that kind of them and us mentality, you know, we're the nurses, you're the patient. And definitely when I went back to work after having Bella, I was definitely a challenge to that. You know, and, you know, it is why I do speak, like I said, openly about some of my own experiences. It doesn't make me any less of a nurse or a mother, you know, and, you know, I like to give, hope to other people that, that they can, especially student nurses, they can be excellent mental health nurses, and, their own mental health struggles don't need to stop them from becoming mental health nurses, as long as they've got the right support in place and they're coming at it from a place of stability, then they can be excellent mental health nurses.
It's such a weird thing that mental health nurses would be frightened of vulnerability, because that's what we're talking about, isn't we? We're talking about an emotional, psychological vulnerability. I know that it's not easy for me, so I can imagine that, if you're just trying to start off with that, navigating that experience, it must be really tough. If we haven't seen anybody like you, saying this is what life is like, life is complicated, and this is how I deal with it. If you have never seen that, it must be such a frightening experience for younger staff. I think we're really failing younger staff if we don't talk about this sort of thing.
Definitely.
I can see we're getting some questions in, but before we come to that, can we just talk a little bit about how you came to discuss this issue and how you have been, in terms of your writing and things like that as well, before we open it up to discussion? So you're saying you always talk about it, and then we moved away from that, but you were talking about, when you first started trying to explain to your children.
Yeah, and that was really important to me. I've worked in mental health for a long time, and I wanted to do it the right way for my kids, and I didn't want it to be, this dark family secret that, was pushed under the carpet and nobody talked about. But again, I wanted to do it in an age-appropriate way that my kids would understand. And, for me as a mental health nurse, that was an incredible challenge. And I didn't know where to start or what to say. So eventually I wrote a children's book exploring perinatal mental illness or maternal mental health. And that was a way for me to explain to my children what was happening to me. And I worked with another mum, Amy, who's an artist, and she illustrated the book. And it's a beautiful book, if I do say so myself. The illustrations from Amy are just incredible. I do have it here. I read it regularly with my own children, because mental health is an ongoing conversation in our household. So I just wanted it to be, initially it was a tool for me and for Amy to explain to her kids, but if this can help another family, then that's amazing. It's kind of aimed at children, like quite young children, so kind of like 3, 4, 5, 6. And it just really gently explains that sometimes mummy has a poorly mind. It compares a poorly mind to being under a rain cloud and feeling sad. And then it talks about the little girl in the book, Faith, who's my daughter's called Faith, my oldest. She has a magical medicine bag, and inside that medicine bag are hope, kind words, and hugs and kisses that Faith uses. And then it kind of brings in that emotional awareness and that emotional intelligence with children, because towards the end, it kind of says, we all have minds, and like we need to look after our bodies, we need to look after our minds, and we all need hope, we all need kind words, and we all need hugs and kisses. So it kind of just opens up that conversation, with young children about awareness about, mental and emotional health. If my kids can, grow up accepting the fact that people have bodies that can get poorly, people have minds that can get poorly, and it's just one of those things. It's, and we can all do things to look after our minds. And my children's primary school, they've used the book. They've read the book to classes, just opening up those conversations, and it's a tool for health professionals as well to direct families to, because it's hard to find the words to explain to your children what is happening, when mummy might be unwell.
I think as well, it's so important to just start the conversation. It doesn't need to be perfect, but the idea that the silence would be the thing that dominates is really worrying, because children understand when something's wrong, and they internalize this blame if they think that, if they don't understand what's going on, or think it's their fault. That's
Yeah.
such a great thing. How do people get hold of this book then? It's published and people can access it?
Yes, so it's published, and I think the link will be somewhere. And I was very proud of myself because I have created a code that gets you free delivery if you use the code. So I'm sure that will be available in some format.
Dave will take care of it.
Yeah.
In fact, why don't we come today for some questions while he's not busy?
Yeah, sorry, I'm tweeting quite a bit tonight. So I have just tweeted out the link to the book. I've also included the code in there that you sent us earlier for that free shipping. And I have just put the message on saying that we're not getting any commission for encouraging people to get books. I sometimes worry that people are thinking, you know, we're trying to sort of make a mint off this, and that's why we're saying to do something. But me and Nicky,
one look at us and they know fine well we are not making a mint off this.
me and Nicky are we're really cheap, aren't we, Nicky? So we encourage people to do things when we actually believe that the things that they should do. So we're absolutely go and have a look and get a copy of that book. We've had a few comments. I just need to find what screen I put them on now, Nicky. I've got so many screens open. It should be here, right? So Shahela has said a lot of pressure and stigma within the Asian culture too. You're expected to manage yourself, and sometimes you receive help from families. However, other times you don't. I suppose, how much kind of support did you have, Jane? You know, and actually, I can appreciate sometimes, even though you may be surrounded by support, it can be really hard to access that support, can't it? No matter how well-meaning it is, and how sort of, you know, really valuable it would be.
Yeah, and it's really hard to tell people what's going on and to tell people how you're feeling. So I'd kind of encourage anybody who is in, you know, contact with someone who has, you know, not long had a baby, you know, check in on the mum. You know, baby's, you know, beautiful and lovely and doing well, but it's really important to ask, you know, how mum is doing. And just offer that, you know, that gentle support. You know, don't have expectations, just send flowers, send food, ring the doorbell, leave the food on the doorstep. You know, that kind of support is really important for families. And like, you know, that said, it, you know, that there is a lot of societal pressure on women and you know, and dads and partners as well.
Yeah, and I suppose we've been through such a difficult time with COVID as well, haven't we, where the support that people maybe would have had pre-COVID has just been completely wiped away. So, you know, even people that were finding it difficult that could get out and access support, that was kind of being really limited to them as well. And I suppose sort of having things like, you know, books can help, can't it? Because, you know, that is something that you can still kind of experience when you're limited with the ability to get out there.
Yeah, definitely.
One of the things I did want to say, because it kind of links into the comment that you made about the issues of mental health professionals feeling difficult to talk about mental health. I suppose one of the things that I found fascinating was when I spoke to a group of mental health student nurses, and kind of some of them sort of disclosing really kind of worries about their own mental health and not knowing where to go. And I suppose it's that kind of message about, you know, you two both teach mental health nursing students, you know, kind of what support do universities have in place? And is that something that, you know, that you find, you know, is something that you can do well, or do you think you kind of miss that?
That's a good question. I think in terms of universities, there is a lot of support available to students in general, and to students who may be struggling with their own mental health. My personal opinion, I do think there is a little bit of a gap in terms of students, in terms of mental health student nurses who are coming to the course with their own mental health lived experience. I do feel that is quite a unique position, not so much unique, but I think it needs a very unique approach to that. because it is challenging. And I found it challenging starting as a mental health nurse lecturer, talking through all the horrendous side effects of medication that I was taking at the same time. Things are more challenging. And I think students with their own lived experience, they do need a different level of support to perhaps other students. But any student nurses out there who do have their own previous experience of mental health difficulties, then take it from me, you can do it. Keep going. Don't let mental illness stop you. It doesn't need to stop you from being an amazing mental health nurse. And it's about living as well as you can with those ongoing challenges. If someone had a physical health problem and needed regular medication or needed a specialist service, that's fine, and things would be adapted to accommodate for that. And it should be exactly the same with mental health conditions as well.
Yeah, and it seems an important point to say tonight as well. We've featured Nurse Lifeline in the past, a really good charity that's available to any nurse or student nurse or partners of nurses that want to talk to people who get the issue of mental health in nursing. So I'll do another link to that as well when I finish sort of this last question from Alfonso. He said, "Thank you, Jane, for sharing your story. It's so important to listen to stories like yours. You were rightly so open about your own experiences, but I was wondering if you experienced any negative attitudes from students or colleagues within academia, and whether your openness has impacted on your professional identity as a nurse lecturer."
That's a very good question.
Congratulations, Alfonso.
And yeah, that's an incredibly good question, and I don't have a complete, and I wish I did have a complete answer to that, but I don't. I think in my role as a nurse lecturer, from my colleagues at UCLan, I've experienced no stigma whatsoever, just pure acceptance. My mental health colleagues at UCLan, they are now friends before colleagues. We really are a really supportive team, and I've always felt 100% accepted and supported. In terms of previously in the past, yes, I have experienced stigma at various points, which has been quite difficult. I try not to focus too much on those negative experiences, because I do have a lot of positive experiences as well. Navigating my identity as a nurse and a lecturer and a patient, I wish I had the complete answer to how to do that, and I wish someone had the answer to give me of how to do that. It's not a linear journey. It's not a straight line journey. It's a all over the place journey. And I could have the option to step away from mental health and do a non-mental health job, but I did try that for a year or so, and I returned to nursing because being a nurse is who I am, and it's what I'm passionate about. It's what I'll always be passionate about, and I will not let having a mental illness stop me from doing the job that I love. It makes it harder at some points, but then I also have a story to tell, and other professionals and students, they can learn from my story as well. So I hope that in some way answers that question.
Yeah, I'm sure Alf will be happy with that response. Go on, Nicky, you carry on now. I'll keep looking if there's anything else.
Well, it's made me think of more things. So one of the things that I was thinking about is it's a strange thing, isn't it? Because on one hand, advocacy is an important role to take, but it always has to be your choice as well, because presumably there'll be some times where you just don't feel like it, or that's not what you want to foreground today. And so this idea that you then have to be like the poster girl for perinatal issues or lived experience voices, that's also something which is quite constraining sometimes, presumably as well. So I guess you shouldn't have to tell people they don't want to, but it's
No.
about if you need support, if you want your working conditions to be different, and yeah, it's a complicated situation, isn't it? When
yeah, it is. You know, in my day-to-day life as a lecturer, I do talk about some of my own experiences sometimes, but for the vast majority of times, you know, I don't need to. My experience, whether I choose to openly talk about my experiences or not, doesn't mean that my own experiences don't shape what I say and what I do, and you know, the approaches that I take to things. So yeah, I would never want anybody with their own lived experience to think that they need to talk about it all the time, or they need to tell patients or colleagues, you know, because that's your personal journey. People see me as quite open and honest, which I am, but I share the tip of the iceberg. You know, there's a lot that I don't talk about publicly, and I guess I am quite kind of confident. Oh, my son's past stage 3. Well done, Joshua. 5 minutes.
Well done. We celebrate every win on this show. So I am, you know, and I guess that's what, you know, professionals with their own lived experience, I would kind of encourage them to think about what they're comfortable talking about, what they're not comfortable talking about, but definitely having that support in place, and those people that you can kind of go to, which I have with my colleagues at UCLan, to say, you know, oh, actually that, you know, I've just done a session and it was quite challenging because, you know, it made me think of this and this, or, you know, someone said this, you know, so that's why I do think that, you know, professionals and student nurses with their own lived experience, you know, it is a really difficult road to navigate, and you know, they do need that support. There is an organisation as well called Integrate Mental Health, who I can tag on Twitter if they're not already there, but they provide support for mental health professionals who also live with mental health challenges. I've never heard of them. That's terrible, isn't
it? Yeah, so they're called Integrate Mental Health, because it is, you know, it is challenging, it is difficult, but like I said before, mental illness will not take me out of the job that I love and the job that I'm passionate about.
So what does the future hold for you? Because I can see we're sort of heading towards the end of our time slot now. I just wondered, you know, what your plans for the future, what's the next stage for you? When's your next book coming out?
So that's another good question. I guess I just, at the moment, I love being a lecturer, and I love working with students, and whether I talk about my own mental health or not, I love inspiring students with the difference that they can make as a mental health professional. You know, so I'm quite happy in the job that I'm doing at the moment, and talking about my own experiences, you know, when people ask, plus navigating being a mum with a mental illness.
And 3 children and no sleep.
Yeah.
You're looking amazing on it, can I just say? We're going to come to sort of like round and have a look and see if there's any sort of like last ideas or anything you want to leave the audience with. But before that, I'll just go to Dave. And Dave, is there any last questions you wanted to ask?
Well, I do want to say, Nicky, I feel a bit sad because you never said how amazing I look with 3 kids. So, you know.
Have I not?
No.
Oh, God.
It's interesting because just when you said integrate, I actually think that you're referencing an organisation that was on episode 8 of MHTV, Nicky.
So, I've never heard of them. Oh my God, this is the end, isn't it?
I'm just watching a video of you now talking to, I think, the 2 founders, Natalie Kemp and Anna.
I 100% don't know why you would bring that up live on air, but thank you.
No, I just think it shows that, you know, some of the kind of themes that we often talk about, they do kind of run across episodes of MHTV, don't they? And it's really nice when we kind of, sort of reinforce that kind of plurality of stuff that's out there for people. And you will remember it was the episode where we talked about moral injury. That was,
yes.
yeah,
that one. Moral injury.
Yeah, it's because Jane didn't use the right episode name.
I was thinking I'd become the human Etch-a-Sketch then. A bit of a shake and it all goes away. Kids won't.
So I think one of the things that obviously I'd like to kind of reflect on is what Jane said about health visiting. And obviously as a health visitor, it's always great to hear when people speak about how that profession has helped them in their lives. I think, it's quite an interesting time for health visitors at the moment, because obviously the numbers have been cut quite significantly over the last few years. But again, mentioned by a political party a couple of weeks ago, when Keir Starmer mentioned it in his speech at the Labour Party conference, promising 5,000 more health visitors, which obviously is always, news to my ears, which is also really positive. But I suppose it's just really sad, isn't it, when we know that the kind of cuts that have happened have kind of cut away at some of these services. But sort of like looking at the other side with the work that's happened from the Maternal Mental Health Alliance, which MHNA is a member of, to kind of really highlight the need for good perinatal services, and the work that Dr. Alan Gregoire's done, and Luciana Berger, which is just so positive. And I'm sure the work that Jane's doing just feeds in really nicely to that, because when people hear the voices of people that have had these kind of experiences, it's harder to ignore, it's harder to not want to fund services that support. So Jane, excellent work that you're doing there. And obviously, like I said before, we're not getting a commission, but we'd encourage everyone watching to get a hold of a copy of your book.
Ask your uni library to order it. I love that.
I think health visitors are so important, and primary care, because it is that universal service that's available to everyone. I had a lot of mental health professionals come in for a week or so or a few visits, then they'd be gone. But my health visitor was the constant throughout that, and they were still there after the mental health teams had gone, and that was really important for me and for us as a family. And my health visitor was the only person who asked my husband if he was okay, and who spent time with him, explaining, what was happening to me, and what their concerns were, and kind of what the plan was moving forward. Health visitors are just absolutely incredibly vital when it comes to that early identification of any perinatal mental health problems.
Absolutely. Is there anything anyone would like to say before we finish up? Any last words or anything like that? No? In that case, it just remains, if anybody's playing mental health tea bingo, feel free to dunk your biscuit or have a drink, because Dave managed to get in his health visitor status again. So please do enjoy that. And it just remains us to thank Jane for coming on and speaking so eloquently and openly about a situation that should be so important to all of us. That idea about how we support each other, how we look after ourselves. So thank you very much, Jane. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you.
No, thank you for having me.
Bye, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.